Introduction to Part 2, When Life as We Knew It Changed. I am writing this in 2025, and I can't believe that I am about to talk about thriving when I consider everything that has happened. I'm not trapped in the past. I'm looking back to understand how everything changed and how I changed with it. The story you're about to read is not a shrine to a lost relationship. It's an exploration of what connection looks like, what it offers, and what its absence can do to a person. Because in early July 2000, I believed everything was steady. Lynn and I were living in a rhythm we had built slowly and intentionally, a life full of affection, ease, and a kind of closeness I once thought unattainable. Nothing hinted that anything was wrong. There were no shadows, no warnings, no tremors beneath the surface to tell me the ground was beginning to split. Only weeks earlier, June 15th, Lynn's strength had seemed unshakable. The passion of that night still lived in my mind, her breath strong, her body warm, her laughter easy. Later, skating on the boardwalk, she pulled me behind her with effortless power, glancing back with that spark that made me feel like the world was expanding, not closing in. I didn't know the monster we lived with, cystic fibrosis, was already tightening its clawed hand around the life we shared. I didn't know how fast it could swallow everything we had built. It had become almost like a routine, even if we had argued earlier in the evening. Arguing, never force. Lynn would finish her bedtime ritual, quiet and unhurried. And then came the moment that always caught me a little off guard and filled me with a sense of awe, no matter how familiar it became. She would remove everything she had been wearing and slip into bed completely naked, pulling the comforter over her as she turned onto her side. A gentle, wordless invitation to come close. I followed her cue, taking off my clothes and settling behind her, matching her curled position, cupping her breast, and letting my arms circle her as we breathed into the same slow rhythm. It was our way of ending the day, comfort, serenity, and a closeness that pulled us both towards sleep. I have heard the heartbreaking stories of women who must suddenly register the simple fact that the man they love is stronger, stories of awareness arriving at the worst possible moment. And it's true, we are never more physically vulnerable than when we are naked. But Lynn never hesitated. The way she settled into sleep each night spoke a different truth entirely. My presence beside her was a place of rest, warmth, and trust. I would slide beside her, and in that simple act, loneliness itself vanished. For someone raised in a family where connection was rationed, where vulnerability was met with dismissal or disgust, those moments felt like a second childhood, one where love was not conditional and safety did not disappear. This is important because the contrast is the heart of Part 2. For years, I had held on to a thin belief that my family of origin might care if something terrible happened, that maybe somewhere in the well I kept drawing from, even if it held only drops, there might be enough water to keep me standing. I could not have imagined how wrong I was, how deep that well truly was. Not a well at all, but an abyss. Later, when everything collapsed, I found myself shouting into that abyss the way Luke Skywalker calls out to Vader in Return of the Jedi, not symbolically, not poetically, but with real desperation. That was me, crying out for help, over and over, my words full of desperation and pain, as I screamed out, "Dad! Mom! Carrie! Please! Help me." And the silence that followed was colder than anything a fictional villain ever delivered. I kept waiting for the moment when my suffering would become too much for them to bear, when the instinct any parent or sibling should have would finally break through. It never came. If you've ever dealt with someone who cannot feel what you feel, who cannot be moved by your pain, you will recognize what comes next, the void, the blankness, the chilling absence of empathy. It is the heart of narcissistic toxicity, and it is the reason survival sometimes requires walking away completely. Part 2 begins at the moment the world tilts, when the monster you thought you'd outpaced catches up, when the life that grounded you is swallowed overnight, when the people you believe might steady you reveal that they cannot or will not see your suffering. I survived what came next. The illness, the injustice, the betrayals, the slow erosion of identity. But survival is not the same as living. Even so, this isn't a story trapped in the past. I'm writing from a life rebuilt piece by piece, a life still unfolding. What happened in 2000 is long ago, yet what it shaped in me, what I had to survive and learn and unlearn, still echoes in the present. Part 2 isn't a love story. It's the record of what it takes to survive what should have destroyed me, and what it means even now to keep choosing to live. To understand the depth of what I lost, you have to see what I once had, and how quickly it vanished. And yes, life moved forward. I dated. In a time of confusion, I married someone, but that relationship wasn't meant to last. Years later, I had a girlfriend who wasn't meant to be either. These connections were part of finding my way, even when I didn't yet know what thriving meant. I'm building connections now, through poetry, through creative nonfiction, through friendships that grow from telling the truth. I'm not waiting for the past to return. I am opening to the life I'm creating, and I intend to thrive. But things did not stay the way they appeared in the last chapter. Everything seemed stable, unshakable, as if nothing would ever change. And then everything did. So we rewind now, not to dwell, but to complete the part of the story that had only just begun to crack. Before you can witness what healing looks like in the present, you need to see the storm that nearly ended me.